And Darin is a senior advisor at Te Puni. He's a long-time user, collector and producer of official data and statistics. He has worked in many research and statistics teams at the Ministry of Education, the Department of Labour and at Stats NZ. Drawing on his experience in working with Māori data, he is going to present his insights into the issues, the challenges and opportunities that may confront us as we consider the measurement of whānau and whānau development. So, mai te paki with Darin.
Kia ora tātou, taranaki te maunga ko Aotea Tuaka, no taranaki ngaro hene te Aotearoa ko Darin Bishop Hau. Kia ora, I hope what I share is you find helpful and useful in thinking about the measurement of whānau development and whānau. When talking about Māori development, naturally we focus on all Māori. Māori as citizens, as members of whānau, hapu and iwi, but as part of the machinery of government, we, who are in decision-making roles, are largely influenced by the measurement of data that refers to Māori as individuals, typically as problems to address using a deficit-based approach. But if we take a whānau-centred approach, as we're discussing today, to address those same issues, then what would we need to think about, to do, in terms of measurement, say using a strength-based approach? I want to share some insights of having worked with Māori data for many years that may help in transitioning to a strength-based view of whānau and whānau development measurement. In 2001, I was working at Stats New Zealand, and the question we were asked was, how could a National Statistics Office, a government agency, support Māori to achieve their goals and aspirations? This was during a period when government agencies had the monopoly of data on Māori, and I suggest still do. And the reporting of Māori varied tremendously from agency to agency, both in terms of quality and usefulness. It was at a time when data was expensive to purchase, especially disaggregated data, meaning that Māori narratives were either hidden or in the hands of select few who may or may not choose to share. It was also at a time where, besides the health sector, there was very little advocacy of Māori data and information, nor was there much data capability amongst Māori, especially with quantitative skills. This is certainly not the case on either front today, which Kiri Kōwhai and I will hear a testimonial. I think some of the measurement challenges we faced back then have parallels with where we are today in measuring whānau and whānau development. In particular, the ability to translate and report on Māori individual and collective identities, Māori concepts and Māori institutions, and a data system that isn't designed to accommodate such needs. We saw our role as facilitators, with the first task being to consider what data and information needs Māori might have, and attempt to reflect those in a framework which led to the development of our Māori statistics framework. Why? As an example for Māori to use for themselves if they chose to identify work program priorities for the department, and to identify potential opportunities of measurement development across the official statistical system. Conceptually, the Māori statistics framework was underpinned by the capabilities approach drawing on the writings of Sen. The underlying premise being that Māori development is the process of improving Māori well-being or outcomes, with development being the enabler. So we also saw ourselves as enablers. What if we simply added another dimension to that? That whānau development is the process of improving whānau well-being or outcomes. Development being the enabler, we as decision makers being the enablers. The other key point was context and increasing demand for Māori data. The framework was developed on the backdrop of movements like Ko Tongarewa and a number of political, policy and legislative reforms during the 1980s and 1990s that in some way influenced the data we collect today. For example, the hui taumata and success of hui taumata has led to an ongoing demand for Māori economic and business data. The 1987 Māori Language Act influenced the need for a national survey of Te Reo Māori, and MEP influenced the need for a count of the Māori electoral population
to assist in determining the number of Māori electorates in Parliament. That's not to say that Māori didn't already need that data, it's just other events made it a reality. Jump to 2006, I was fortunate enough to represent the department at a UN workshop on Indigenous people and indicators of wellbeing. I remember being asked how long it was going to take to populate the framework, and my response was, you'll need to play a long game. Why? We understood the work involved to measure Māori concepts, to design new collections, and to produce new information. We understood the importance of strong working relationships with Māori and users of Māori data, and the need to engage, to check in, and more importantly, to revise. We understood the costs, both in time and resource. We understood many data gaps that existed. When I read an amazing analytical report or see a new data collection, my go-to question is always, can we produce the same for Māori? And I can tell fairly quickly from the glazy eyes what the answer is going to be. The issue is that the majority of data is either designed to address problems or influenced by international practices and guidelines, and those manuals don't have a section on counting Indigenous peoples. We also understood we couldn't do it by ourselves. We needed the data collectors and producers to play ball, because without them nothing will change. I've only referred to my time at Stats New Zealand. Things have progressed greatly since then, including on the framework. So I do want to mihi to Rhonda Paku and her team and the government statistician Liz McPherson for the work that they have done and the leadership they have shown in continuing this important mahi. Making the visible invisible. Around the time of the UN workshop, I had a data eureka moment. I was reading a paper on First Nations and stewardship, and this paragraph caught my eye. Claiming the knowledge high ground is a critical element in colonisation. The other is made first inferior and then invisible. One method of doing this is through the production of particular knowledge. For me, it suggests the importance of two things: definition and identification. For definition, the way we define people or entities shapes the way we tell their narratives. Over the past 160 years, we've seen Māori defined or identified in official data or legislation as tribal in 1858, hapu, native, blood quantum, race, Māori descent, iwi, ethnicity, and today you'll hear reference to Māori, Whānau, hapu and iwi. If you look at old reports that describe Māori, you'll see the narrative reflecting the definitions of that time. Even in 2001, Māori was the main reference group or used as shorthand for Māori, Whānau, hapu and iwi. In terms of identification, if we can't identify those individuals or groups of interest in the data, we can't report on them. They become invisible in the narrative, even though they are visible in the data. They exist in the data. For example, the need for Māori business statistics. It's been a long journey dating back to the 1980s, and it's still going. In its simplest form, if we were able to identify Māori businesses within the existing data sets, it would make visible a wealth of data and information. I know firsthand it isn't that simple, but when the data already exists, you can appreciate the frustration. But these issues pose questions when thinking about whānau development measurement. How should we define or identify whānau within our existing data collections? How do we adequately conceptualise and locate whānau according to their characteristics of identity and culture? Or should we? And do we need to review what we currently have? The alternative is to infer or to approximate, where the resulting analysis is seen as okay, but also inferior, because it carries the qualifier proxy. For example, using family data as a proxy for whānau. Family data, including Māori family data, is important in its own right, full stop. Or we'll say something like a large proportion are likely to be Māori. We infer. We can develop a statistical method to improve the inference, but it's still just that. I appreciate that it's more complex than I portray here, but I also believe it's possible to effect change. I've seen it. Te Kupinga, the National Māori Social Survey, while a 13-year journey to get it off the ground, is a great example of what is possible with vision, advocacy, cultural capability, technical capability, adequate resourcing, and lots of goodwill. If, as the Crown, we want to shape the future for whānau and whānau development, then surely we need to do more with our data and information systems to better reflect whānau lives and to help inform their and our decision making. Data created through measurement. I had another Eureka data moment. Funny enough, from the same paper. It was a great paper. Data do not exist absolutely. Instead, it's created through measurement based on a theory that certain information is useful for producing particular knowledge. I started to think about the importance of measurement decisions in determining what data is collected and what isn't. What evidence is created to inform policy, operational investment decisions, and what evidence isn't created because of our measurement decisions. For whānau, I thought, well, how do our measurement decisions affect the adequacy of the data system to meet their needs? I've grouped these measurement decisions under 4 broad groups. Proposal for data. If the answer is yes, design and collect, compilation, and analysis and reporting. Design and collect is probably the main area where whānau is involved through, say, an engagement process, even though many other decisions are made that influence what data is collected and what is reported. So what are some examples? Reducing child poverty. In 2017, the government announced reducing child poverty as a key priority. In Budget 2018, provisions for extra funding were announced for policy advice, measurement and reporting purposes. And last year the Child Poverty Reduction Act was enacted. And more recently, Stats New Zealand published the poverty measures that they will report on an annual basis. It's an example of how data creation through measurement can move really quickly if it's a key priority and sufficient resources are directed at that work. Iwi affiliation. Interestingly, the need for iwi affiliation data was not led by Māori, but by the then Department of Māori Affairs, who in 1987 made a submission to collect iwi affiliation data in anticipation of an upcoming policy change related to iwi. A decision was made to collect the data in 1991 census, and you may be aware that the Act to enable the devolution of resources to iwi runanga was repealed by the incoming 1990 government. So strictly speaking, iwi affiliation data was no longer required for government purposes, but the data was still collected and Stats New Zealand produced statistical profiles for iwi. It was subsequently used as part of the formula for calculating Māori fisheries allocation and by iwi for their own planning and development. But it does pose the question, had it not been for the submission by Māori Affairs in 1987, would iwi affiliation data be collected today? When thinking about measures and indicator development, you need to posit yourself in that space from that perspective to visualise what it might look like. I try to do that by asking 3 simple questions. Who is the group of interest or unit of measurement? That answer puts me in the right space, the right perspective. What am I trying to measure? And what indicator or indicators best represents that measure? The sequence is critical. If we use Te Reo Māori as an example, you can see how the unit of measurement places you in the right space for visualising the measures and indicators. In terms of measures, in this example, I'm trying to gauge the transmission of Te Reo Māori from one generation to another. And in terms of indicators, I try to identify a marker that best represents that measure. The trap is wanting to jump straight to the indicators and not do the other parts that's required, and then wondering why the resulting analysis doesn't tell you what you needed to know. So if we take this example, at the individual level, simply looking for the number of speakers. At the family level, one measure indicator used here is looking at the transmission of the language Te Reo Māori from the parent to the child. If intergeneration transmission of Te Reo is an important part of learning in the home. And then at the whānau level, I'm trying to understand what resources it has and what it may require in the future. Now, I need to qualify that I've just made these measures and indicators up, and they're not authorised by Te Puni Kōkiri. But the message is, it is possible to think from a different perspective, to visualise measures and indicators. Becoming an enabler. Definitions and identification matter. In early 2000, Te Puni Kōkiri took a rather radical shift and introduced the notion of a Māori economy and a Māori asset base. It caused quite a stir, and the measurement was heavily scrutinised. Since then, the work has been updated on 3 occasions, and now it's quite normal to talk about the Māori economy. And when the banks start writing reports on the Māori economy and future opportunities for Māori, you know you're in the game. It was heartening to hear Associate Professor Manuka Hinare mihi to Te Puni Kōkiri for the move it took in the early 2000s to create a whole new set of information. In terms of whānau, I feel like we're at the same point as Te Puni Kōkiri was back in 2000. But the thing is, we don't need to start from scratch. There's been a massive amount of engagement over the years with Māori regarding their goals and aspirations as whānau, and in a roundabout way, their data and information needs. There's been a great deal of literature on measuring whānau and whānau outcomes. The Whānau Centred policy tool that has been presented today provides a good guide for how policy and decision makers can set about achieving the outcomes included in the Whānau Water Outcomes Framework. You have your own frameworks, and most agencies have goals, plans, or strategies specifically focused on Māori. For example, ka hokitia, i korowai oranga, i kai kākarenga. And thinking about today, my question would be, how would your goals for Māori map to the Whānau Water Outcomes Framework? 2 years ago, Te Puni Kōkiri and the then Subaru hosted the forum Te Rito Rito. It started a conversation focused on research, policies and programs that support whānau hapu and iwi wellbeing. Tā Mason, in summarising the forum, made this comment. The point's been made time and time again. We need to shift the focus, to shift away from deficit data, thinking data that leads to nowhere, and policies that are based on deficit. And what we need to be increasing and moving towards is data and policies that enable us to realise the potential of whānau, hapu and iwi, rather than what's wrong with whānau, hapu and iwi. So we need to take some bold steps to become facilitators and enablers of whānau development through the data we collect and the narratives we tell. Kia ora.